told can you hear me? Can anyone hear me in the chat? Awesome. Thanks, guys. So there's a video that is playing. I guess we're going to go live here in 1 second. Well, that was exciting. I did not expect that.
We're back.
We're back. We're back with more. Anyway, really excited for a dialogue today. Gavin and I are going to have a conversation about mastering advanced measurement for higher funnel media. Before we dig in, we've got an hour. We got a lot to talk about. I wanted to just kind of share a short story that I think illustrates the need for this conversation and more conversations like this. I was at an event with the Financial Communication Society, which has some members, really, really sophisticated financial service marketers, Invesco, BNY Wealth, Goldman Sachs, very, very serious, both from a marketing perspective and from a financial stakeholder perspective. And, these luminaries in the space are at this event, they're on the stage and they're all looking at each other. They're saying, look, we still, we've got the most engaged CFOs, the most engaged financial stakeholders, and everybody believes that brand and awareness media marketing that we're doing at the top of the funnel, everybody believes that it's doing something, but nobody buys the measurement. I as a high-powered CMO in this space, still can't get my CFO to really see the value and the incremental value of this brand media that I'm putting out there in the same way that I do. So I would say that it's fair to say, Gavin, that this is a pretty unresolved question still in the space, and what you're going to hear from both of us today are some hopefully some simple advice for how we might help you as your brand resolve those questions. That said, Evan, if you want to take us to the next slide and keep us rolling here. So here's the agenda for us. We're going to talk about the challenge and the opportunity of higher funnel channels. We'll introduce ourselves first, of course. We'll talk about how to choose from a variety of different measurement approaches depending on your needs. We'll give a real world example of where pairing awesome top funnel awareness and innovative measurement drove client results. And then we'll leave you with a couple takeaways. And then hopefully, if there's no more stealth video interruptions, we'll get through with 40 or 45 minutes, get through in 40 or 45 minutes and have 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. Sound good? Let's do it. So I'm Pat Van Gorder. I'm president, head of growth, co-founder here at Level Agency. Been with the team here since 2009, the very, very beginning, and been interested in effective client success oriented strategies, storytelling, and measurement in complex end markets ever since. And then Gavin, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll talk a little bit about our companies.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Hey everyone, Gavin Murray, Director of Client Strategy at The Trade Desk. I've been here almost 4 years now. Prior to this role, I was Director of Measurement Partnerships at The Trade Desk for 3.5 years. Focus on helping advertisers get the most value out of their investment on The Trade Desk and with their agency partners, and using data to tell that story in terms of the value that's being driven by upper and mid funnel media. And then prior to The Trade Desk, I was at Neustar, now TransUnion, for 5 years, focused on helping advertisers understand the value of their media investments across the entire media mix using MMM, MTA, incrementality, DMP, onboarding techniques to help advertisers understand the value of their media and what outcomes it's driving up to the CFO.
Thanks, Gavin. So just a quick word about Level. Most of you know our agency, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it. But we've been in the space since 2009, which makes us dinosaurs in performance marketing native world. We spend about $250 million on behalf of our awesome clients. We've got 190 employees, and our specialty is delivering epic wins in complex ecosystems. So performance marketing epic wins in complex ecosystems. To do that, we activate teams across paid, organic, conversion rate optimization, LPO, ads, marketing automation, and increasingly a really sophisticated and multifaceted measurement capability and data science team, which you're going to hear us talk a little bit more about today.
Yeah, so just to give a quick overview of what we do at the Trade Desk, we help advertisers reach the rest of the internet. And so we call that the open internet, basically anything outside of walled gardens. And this aggregate demand is substantial in the majority of internet time and digital media consumption. So we help brands aggregate all that demand and then enable techniques like frequency capping and measurement across all of those disparate publisher properties to enable holistic strategy to maximize outcomes on media investments.
So we're here today to talk about the challenge and opportunity of awareness channels. And I think the fundamental question here is for brands that either are not investing at the top of the funnel or are investing but thinking of it as fundamentally a different muscle than their performance marketing bottom of the funnel. How can they bridge the gap and start to have more integrated conversations about awareness media and how to measure it? So if you go to the next slide. You're doing great, by the way, Evan, at anticipating, but I'll let you know if we need you to move it forward. So high funnel measurement channels, are myriad, and they are more present and I think more acute for brands that have a strong performance marketing muscle than those that don't, right? If you are a legacy brand that doesn't really have a scaled performance marketing play or path to market, you're more comfortable spending in channels that are less directly accountable because you're not used to the fact that, yes, you have channels like search, like social in many cases, like affiliate or other sort of direct transactional channels that can describe or at least approximate direct impact. Another thing that makes awareness and higher funnel channels difficult for that subset of clients is the lack of immediate results, right? It's like SEO. It can take, a period of, months, quarters to really realize the full value of spending higher funnel. And then generally it's difficult to choose what metrics actually matter. And you see a preponderance of, vanity metrics. And, if you're a CMO and you're evaluating a proposal that puts forth a an impression target or a even a brand lift metric as the be all end all result of an awareness campaign, that's a lot more difficult to understand and to sell against than something in the performance category. Whoosh. Next slide. Thank you. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, right? So we see pretty consistently and compellingly dramatic results when we effectively market at the high and the mid funnel. So, 45% higher ROI and 7% increase in offline sales from this Google study. Our own data consistently, when we've done our own incremental testing, which we'll talk about, shows, a pretty consistent range of lift areas that average around 30% aggregate lift in brand conversion. So if you look at search volume, click-through rate, and conversion rate, all up, all in markets where, we've run high and mid funnel incremental tests, we see, we've seen on average a 30% aggregate lift across those metrics. And then for consumer brands, 10% extra share of voice in markets where there is activation of higher funnel channels. So it works and it matters. Gavin, I'm hoping you can maybe tell us a little bit about how you see marketers and specifically performance marketers embracing data-driven approaches to mid-funnel and high funnel campaigns. Next slide, Evan.
Yeah, absolutely. If we think about how much time someone spends on the internet outside of walled gardens, it's, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of time. In fact, we find it's 3/4 of their time. And when we think about the internet, it's not just a browser, right? It's streaming, it's podcasts, it's connected television, it's gaming, and online press is a portion of that still. And we really help advertisers understand the value of advertising on these properties. And the way I see this come to fruition is especially with channels like connected television, which historically something like linear television, you're not able to measure as well because there's not as much data on that buy and it can't be tied back to a full customer journey like connected television media can, because with connected television, you have an authenticated login based off an email address with any publisher, and we're able to transact media off of that authenticated login, which for us is UID2, but we also work with other identifiers in the space because we're open platform and agnostic in that sense. And so we're able to quantify the value of that upper mid-funnel connected TV investment to the ultimate outcome in a lot of different circumstances. And then we also enable that type of measurement with third-party partners. So we're able to work with mobile measurement partners, MMM partners, MTA partners, the list goes on, to be able to help marketers understand the value of that upper mid-funnel media that may not be the last touch prior to conversion, but has a significant influence on getting that to that ultimate conversion. And we're helping marketers better understand the value of that, because I think everyone inherently understands the value of these kind of channels. And a brand like Coca-Cola, for instance, they didn't become well known by never advertising on TV or never having upper funnel media. I think that's a critical component of any media plan. And so we're able to better help marketers quantify the value of that by the shift to digital from offline channels like linear TV. So speaking of reach and CTV, as I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of research in the space with our partner iSpot, who has a direct integration on our platform that advertisers can take advantage of at no cost. And what this enables us to do is quantify the incremental reach of connected television campaigns over linear TV campaigns. And we find that 46% of overall consumers as of August 2023 had incremental reach on connected television, meaning you can't find these people on linear TV. They're only on connected TV now. And we see this number growing more and more over time. And we see this 46%. It will vary by vertical, but this is the average across all verticals that we see. And so we do think there's a huge opportunity for advertisers to reach an audience via an effective medium like television that they can't reach on linear television. So while linear television still has its place on the media plan, we're finding that connected television should start earning more of that share and really help to quantify the value of TV media better than we could in the past.
It's interesting, Gavin. You know, one of the things that I think is really an aha perspective is that, you know, we've got, this is not a conversation fundamentally about whether the channel works. The channel works, and examples like this show how the digitization of the channel is making it work better and better and better and better, and reach more and more in a more targeted and more efficient way. This is fundamentally, though, a question of how we measure, right? And I think that that's, you know, you guys have such an interesting position as, you know, the standing outside of the duopoly and the triopoly from a, you know, major walled garden perspective. You know, I'd love to hear your perspective on like what Trade Desk can bring to bring to the party as it relates to solving the question of valuation rather than efficacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're really well positioned to do that in the market, given that we don't own any inventory in our platform. So we're strictly a demand side platform that enables advertisers to transact on the highest quality media that's going to drive the best outcomes for their business. And so because we don't own any inventory ourselves, we're able to give an impartial POV, and we work with many third-party partners as well as our own solutions to help advertisers understand the value of their media. And so today I'll go through a few examples of brand impact measurement, reach measurement, and then the quality of the inventory that you're running on and our ability to transact on premium quality inventory on the open internet on behalf of advertisers.
Awesome. So as we step forward, we're going to hear that perspective across the variety of different areas. So, we're going to start sort of in the measurement space, and we'll talk about efficacy a little bit later and talk about quality in the context of, what we know works and what our studies and our research across many clients have consistently borne out, which is that the whole game is quality inventory. Shocker, but that's single-handedly the biggest predictor of whether or not a higher funnel campaign will be effective or not is the relative quality of the inventory in terms of the premium nature of it, and it's the absence of fraud within it, and the contextual value, and all those things that feed that sort of quality picture. But first, let's talk about measurement. So let's talk about some of the practical questions that that we would advise you as our client to think about as you think about getting sort of evolving your measurement strategy to the next level. And again, I think this is a conversation that's really important for brands that that have been historically focused at the mid or low funnel. So brands that have really mature search and social campaigns, PPL campaigns, and then also brands that have for a long time valued and understand the value and the importance of higher funnel media, but they think of it sort of as this thing off in a silo, and they've got one team that's running their performance and then one team that's running their awareness, and the two meet quarterly or monthly or weekly, but it's not a super integrated approach. So this is if that describes you, this is for you. So I want to start with some strategic questions. You want to start with a definition of, what is the overarching thing that we're trying to do here? In most cases, the best and most applicable overarching sort of master question here to ask is, what is the way that I can invest my limited funds in the way that achieves my growth goals most consistently? And just, one thing that statement isn't is, what is the best way that I can invest my limited funds in a way that achieves my, my marketing KPIs most consistently, which is, I think, a different type of question that is not as fundamentally tied to the growth goals of your business as foundationally. So I think if we take that as our North Star, which is, I am your financial advisor. Instead of advising you on your portfolio of, stocks and bonds, I'm advising you on, your portfolio of media channels. What is the best deployment of my capital to drive the growth goals that I have for the business? In the short term, we think it's really important, just strategically and thematically, to make sure that you're making, you're taking down quick wins from an agile perspective. So like, what are the quickest things that I can do now to drive wins that will de-risk the investment, that will make changes that get everyone sort of on board with the change, get everyone on board with the strategies that we're implementing. But at the same time, what are the long-term approaches that I need to better inform my allocation and planning model? So how do I, plan tests or tools that will allow me to make better investment decisions in the mid to long-term horizon than the data that I have to make those decisions now? Some sort of considerations and watchwords to be mindful of. The cost of knowing the answer to a question in data science or measurement should not be higher than the potential benefit of the answer of that question. And that's, a little bit tongue in cheek, but, you'd be surprised how much, how many billions are spent answering questions that fundamentally don't add up to the potential impactable result. So, make sure that the questions that you're asking, if you get the answer to them, matter, and they tie back to the business growth goals that we talked about on the prior side. We think it's really critical to have C-suite buy-in from go. So, if assuming that the whole C-suite has agreed on a raft of growth goals, one thing that we strongly advise our marketing leaders is to go back to CEO, CFO, other stakeholders on that C-suite team and say, okay, we agreed to X% growth, and I told you that my initiatives to drive X% growth were A, B, and C. Here's how I'm measuring A and B, and here's how I'm going to be, coming back to you and having these conversations. Having that conversation in advance seems obvious, but it is very, very helpful in the more nuanced measurement world than sort of in the pure performance. I spent X, I got Y conversations, and often conversations default to those things if you don't set that expectation up front. And then finally, what are the consumer data privacy considerations of the way that I'm trying to measure? If I am all in on a multi-touch model, and my activation strategy is across channels and geographies that make that difficult from a privacy perspective, I probably have the wrong approach. And this is actually, I think, another opportunity to plug the UID 2.0, Gavin. I know you guys have sort of invested in a privacy safe solution that should help brands as they try to navigate this side of the equation. Is there anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have UID 2 in market, which we are a champion of, but it's open source, so anyone can access it with the as long as they abide by the governing laws that we have put forth. So there's different regulations that we've put in place to ensure consumer privacy is at the forefront. But the way we're able to utilize UID2 is through partnerships on UID2 that we have with many different publishers. So in the CTV space, you think about Roku, Disney, et cetera. All these large publishers are now transacting on UID2 and our partners in that area. And then we also have advertisers that work with UID2 directly with us, and they use that as a seed audience to help transact on media. So they send us their first party data based off of a UID2 identifier, and then we're able to use that as the core of their measurement strategy, whether it be closed loop measurement or using that for lookalike audience activation. We're able to use identifiers that are privacy conscious to help advertisers maximize their media return. And we expect that to continue to come more to the forefront as brands start to better understand the value of their own first party data outside of a walled garden.
Thanks, Gavin. So moving on to some operational questions. And again, we're sort of in the setting the table for your measurement planning phase here. The types of questions that we're going to try to answer about higher funnel media that we put into market. Incrementality, first and foremost. If I did this, what did I get out of doing it? Not just that I can source directly to that channel, but what did I get in the area where I did that? What was the contribution, the incremental contribution of that channel across the ecosystem? What's the decay rate or the lag effect? So when I run something, how long does it take to see an effect after I've ran it, and how long does that effect last? And then frequency, like how frequently does it like what is the optimal level of repeat impressions that give me the best bang for my buck? Is it 3? Is it 10? Is it 15? What deployment of of media gives me the appropriate level, but pre-saturated level of frequency to drive my intended effect. I'm going to give you sort of a framework that my team has been very excited about. It comes from the Modern Market Measurement Playbook in March of 2024. But this is something that I think will sort of set the table for the conversation that we're going to have next about some of the options that you have from a measurement perspective. So, the way that I think about this is there is no perfect model. There is no single model that describes reality. There are different models that do a really good job of describing different elements of what's happening and helping you to answer specific questions that either matter in the short term or the long term. And you think of these as like different lenses, like you've been to the optometrist, presumably, different lenses that, that they put in front of you and says, okay, is better or worse, better or worse, better or worse. These different measurement approaches in aggregate increase granularity. They increase the distance that you can look and improve visibility. But any individual model does not, describe the whole. But we're going to talk next about sort of these three, or two of these three. We're going to kind of skip over direct attribution for the most part, knowing that one is fairly well understood by performance marketers and by honestly anyone, because it's very easy to understand. And we're going to focus on marketing mixed models and incrementality testing. Incrementality testing in terms of your measurement strategy. So you can go to the next slide, Evan. So we're going to start with incrementality testing. And, this is basically a simple, dumbed down way to understand this, as I'm sure most of you already do, is incrementality testing is controlling for some sort of experiment. So, you do something and you do something in one place, you don't do it somewhere else, and you try to make sure that the thing that you did had a positive effect by measuring and controlling for a variety of other factors. So, that's the simple dumbed down version of it. But basically, what we're trying to do when we advise a client on test design is, we want to design something that matters, that ultimately will drive, their the business objectives that they have, but is also sort of as defined of scope enough that allows us to get a really good result. If you go to the next slide. So to that end, we take a pretty rigorous approach around structured testing. Geotesting is difficult because you have to really make sure that you're matching markets effectively. Better way to do it is audience testing. So if you're able to sort of draw a circle around an audience and split it in half, take 1 million in the experiment and 1 million in the control, that's great. But basically, whatever your segmentation is, the idea here is, let's say we're going to run this media test. We're going to add, Trade Desk premium inventory, and we're going to expose a subset of our audience to it. We're going to be really intentional about the subset that we expose, and we're going to define, what they see when they see it, and we're going to make sure that we're comparing that subset against a similar subset that meets all the same criteria, looks the same, that doesn't get the exposure. And then we're going to run the test, typically 2, 3, 4 months. We're going to report during that test as it's running on what we're seeing. But instead of talking about, the direct results of the test first and foremost, like the impressions and the click-through rate on the actual, ad units that are running, because none of that stuff really matters at the end of the day. The measurement set is going to be talking about aggregate overall lift. So we'll say, let's take a geo test where we've done a good job splitting geos. We'll say in Houston, we ran this and we matched that against a market like Phoenix that was very similar, and we didn't run it in Phoenix. And over the course of the test, running the campaign in Houston, we saw a dramatic lift in terms of brand search for your brand during that test. And we controlled for all these other factors. And we know with a statistical significance, 95% confidence that this thing that we did was the thing that drove this 20% lift. And then we take that, that insight, we beat it up from a math perspective, we beat it up from a scientific rigor perspective, and we say, if you do this now in Phoenix, you can expect the same 20% lift. Right? That's the basic fundamental idea of taking the results of an incrementality test and applying it to the go forward media plan. Before we move on to media mix modeling as a tool, step it right back one, Evan. Oh, no, other way. Thank you. Gavin, anything, I know that everyone has, or many people have a good story as it relates to like either really good or really bad test design or really interesting results from structured testing. Anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I like the example that you gave of looking at audience-based approach to this type of analysis versus strictly geo-based. I think geo-based does have its place with certain forms of measurement, like with linear TV, if you may be limited to geo-based testing, but with digital audience-based media buying, it's ideal to test with an audience-based approach and have a holdout group, as you mentioned earlier, as part of that. But I think the audience-based media buying is really where we see the future and what we're helping enable our clients do most effectively. And as I mentioned earlier, off of their own first-party data, which we find to be most beneficial to finding a lookalike audience that's similar to your own current consumers. So we find that doing a test with an audience-based approach is ideal. And so structuring it that way is going to give you the best understanding of media's impact on outcomes versus strictly a geo-based approach, especially when it comes to digital media.
I've loved, I think one of the really smart things that the new wave of ABM technology, DSP integrated ABM technology, so think like Demand Base, have done in the B2B space, is that they built that audience level lift testing right into sort of the core product. So it's interesting, you think about these as predominantly consumer oriented solutions just because of the size of the audience in most cases for awareness testing. But the whole category of ABM has been really redefined by sort of in part by building that integrated audience-based split testing to be able to say, hey, we compared the firms that you're actively targeting against a subset of firms that look like them, but you're not actively targeting, and we see a 20% lift on those. So it's neat to see some of the different ways that audience-based approach is being brought to life, and sort of the product space to make tools that have been more consumer-oriented apply to B2B spaces as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point on B2B. It's possible to do this type of measurement even with B2B. While it can be a smaller data set, a little bit more difficult, it's definitely possible. And there's companies out there that are doing that. And there's partners that we work with, like Bombora as an example of a partner that focuses on B2B measurement. So yeah, definitely a great point that this isn't just limited to B2C.
Totally. Finally got you there. Evan was pushing us forward. You're doing the Lord's work, my friend. Thank you. So we're going to talk next about media mix modeling. And this is, as Kyle has appropriately pointed out, this is not necessarily a separate discipline from structured testing. Ultimately, the best media mix modeling work incorporates a really rigorous learning agenda and structured testing plan to make it better and better and better. But ultimately, if you are spending a significant amount in media, one of the things that we advise our clients to consider is putting together a media mix model program that lasts over the course of a year, with outputs on a quarterly basis. Basically, that helps us answer the question, a couple key questions, right? Like, based on what I'm spending across what channels and what I value, what are the metrics that I care about? What should I be spending? What is the appropriate level of investment to achieve my goals? And then if you go to the next slide, more importantly, where I should be spending it. Ultimately, this is sort of the core, has always been the core idea of a media mix model is, how do I find the point of diminishing return on these yield curves to make sure that my investment of my limited capital budget, that my investment is optimal and is delivering the best results. And basically, how do I plot? You can imagine each of these lines, the red one, the orange one being Google, and the green one being Trade Desk, and yellow one being Facebook, or all the way down to the campaign level. If you have the scale and granularity to do that. But basically, our goal is to invest at the point where that curve, before that curve starts to level off, right? Because that's where the model is telling us each dollar that we spend is yielding less than the dollar before it. And therefore, we should see if we've got a better place to put that money in the plan. And I think this has been one of the really exciting conversations to be having. We have an awesome data science team here at Level that does this work for our clients. But just generally, like the space has exploded in terms of the tools that are available. I know Trade Desk has a media mix modeling tool. Google has launched their tool, and then just generally there's a bunch of open source and other tools out there that are making something that was kind of a dark art and kind of a really expensive proposition. If you were a CMO to go out and do this, you used to have to spend $50 million in media, and expect to spend $1 million just on the model. Making this more accessible. It's still not for everybody, right? You have to be spending enough to get good signal through, but it's definitely more accessible than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. Anything you want to say about the Trade Desk approach here?
Yeah, absolutely. So our focus right now is helping advertisers get the data from our platform to power their own MMM solutions, whether they work with an agency like Level or directly build their own MMM, or with a third-party partner. We enable all of our advertisers that work with us to send that data out of the platform, because we view that to be the client's data, not our data. So we have our My Reports data set, which all clients have access to in our UI, and that can be sent to their agency or measurement partner for MMM measurement. And it gives a lot of granularity of insight that you're not going to get from other data sources. An example of this would be for connected television advertising, looking at specifically decision media when I apply data to my CTV buy versus non-decision CTV, where I'm just strictly focusing on reach and what the incremental difference is between each of those two, and teasing that out in your MMM directly, provided you have enough spend on the channel. That's one way we've seen that the data used in market really effectively by a lot of marketers.
Awesome. Thank you. You want to talk a little bit about brand lift as a concept? I know it's something that we haven't spent a lot of time on in the context of the overall measurement toolkit, but when might it make a ton of sense, and how might it be well executed when it does make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of brands have their own brand tracker that they run either internally or with a market research agency, where they're looking at what's the awareness of my brand, what's the familiarity, favorability, purchase intent on a monthly or quarterly basis. And what this solution enables through our partner Lucid is understanding the impact of a singular campaign on impact to brand lift. So it really dives further down to a specific campaign. Let's say you run a CTV campaign, you want to understand what was the lift on my brand, whether it be favorability or it be awareness, depending on the size of your brand. That's an insight we can bring to bear directly in the UI by just turning this on. And then we've recently rolled this out with more partners. So Upwave is another one, and we have a lot of other partners that are building to our Brand Lift API. So we're excited to be launching even more partners on the platform, because we recognize a lot of advertisers have a brand partner that they like to work with and use that as a source of truth across their entire media mix. So this is an effective tool and easy to use way of understanding the impact of a singular campaign.
Thanks, Kevin. So I think just to kind of close on this, the measurement tools perspective, I think thinking of this sort of as kind of a three-step approach, where we're thinking about what makes sense to best describe what's happened in the past. What do I need to plan future scenarios effectively, and how do I continuously optimize my my model for performance? So I think the takeaway here is that this is a continuous improvement process, not an endpoint in itself. So I think you start by asking really good questions. You then describe both a activation plan and a measurement plan that answers that question. You figure out what you need to be true for that plan to work. You run it, you measure it, and then you run the cycle again. And at each phase, hopefully that picture gets a little bit less blurry for you. So I want to share just a quick story here. This is a case study from a client in education. If you go to the next slide. So I think the brief here is basically a client in the vocational education space was heavily reliant on pay-per-lead and wanted to get out of that space for a variety of reasons. Predominantly from an exposure perspective, didn't want to have as much exposure as they did to third-party media. Wanted to be able to have more direct control over where they were placing and what they were buying. And there was not enough demand at the bottom of the funnel to support what needed, the gap between the portion of the pay-per-lead buy and what was needed for the overall growth goals of the business. So it wasn't, there wasn't just a, hey, go spend more in Google strategy that was viable. What we had to do was basically build out a top of funnel plan. And we did this split test. This table on the right shows some of the results. First the control. But we did a split test where we went heavy up in awareness in a subset of markets, and we drove really impressive results in a short period of time. This is actually I don't think even all the way through the 4-month period in that period, but ultimately it worked really well. It saw dramatic improvements, sort of broad-based improvement across enrolls, leads, and then sort of all of the things that we're tracking from an SEO perspective as well to sort of make sure that we were capturing at the bottom of the funnel. So one of the things that we didn't really talk about today is how to see a strategy like this as connected to rather than disconnected from your bottom funnel capture strategy, both on the paid and the organic side. But it's really important to have all of those pieces in place, because if you're going to generate the demand, you better be in a position to capture it. So a couple of takeaways here that I would leave you with before we go to Q&A here. If you go to the next slide. So just from a understanding of the framework here, we shared this framework a little bit earlier. There are advantages and disadvantages to each of those interlocking lenses here. Like I said, there's nothing that's perfect, but it's a helpful way to think about, what are the types of use cases that I need? What are the types of measurement solutions that I need to explore? So, whether I'm, trying to manage and optimize a specific campaign from a in-period cross-device perspective. I'm trying to create a planning capability from a media mix modeling perspective, or I'm trying to answer specific questions about which tactics and channels I need to be activating to maximize my throughput from an incrementality testing perspective. There is different complexity, challenges, and realities for each of these, and they require in many cases different skill sets, right? So it's in some cases different teams that are actually you'll need to activate to work on each of these elements. But I think understanding this framework as a toolkit is one helpful takeaway, hopefully, for you. And then the other one, which I'm going to just set you up, Gavin, and let you go for a little bit on this, is basically one thing that we've seen over and over and over again. And by the way, this is one of my my favorite things. There are all these tests that brands do through agencies or through others that consistently yield the same results, but everybody's still testing them because maybe they haven't tested them before, or that they haven't. There's in some cases there's not a great way for those learnings to be shared. I can tell you, sitting here as an agency that runs these tests across a variety of different clients, quality is the biggest single factor that drives results from a high funnel awareness perspective. Two types of quality of the signal, right? So make sure that you are optimizing your spend against the right signal, that you're not just optimizing towards leads or something that is a vanity metric, that you're more focused on optimizing the signal towards a lower funnel result, even as you activate at the higher and the mid funnel. And then quality at a publisher inventory level as well. And I know Trade Desk has some solutions there that Gavin wanted to talk about, which I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. A couple of things I wanted to highlight on the quality front and how it's a huge focus for us at the Trade Desk. We recently launched a product called Sellers and Publishers 500 Plus, or SP 500 Plus for short. And the intention of this product is to aggregate the best of the open internet in a single ETF, so to speak. So if you think about, Pat, you mentioned like the analogy of media investment to stock and bond portfolio. We think of it similarly as well. And if we think about all of the publishers that are out there, curating that into a high quality ETF of publishers is what we're aiming to do here, to give marketers confidence in the quality of the inventory they're activating against, while providing the scale to be able to apply data to media buys versus buying directly with a single publisher, where you don't have the ability to frequency cap and apply technology, lookalike AI modeling to your media buys to reach the best of the open internet. And that's what we're able to bring with this in our new UI, Kokai. And if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of go in a bit more detail on SP 500 Plus. But if we go to the right-hand side of the slide and think about the entire open internet, we have our own platform standards to be able to run on the Trade Desk. We don't just include everyone on the Trade Desk as is. We have a very strong inventory quality team that focuses on this. But as an added step, the SP 500 Plus standard, which is an even more curated list of the premium open internet. And then that enables you to have targeting and controls like frequency capping on your media buys over a broad range of publishers. And ultimately, this gives you the opportunity to bid on the best inventory at a campaign level using AI technology. We have Koa AI on the platform, which we've had for several years now. And as AI comes more to the forefront in marketing, we find it to be a compelling solution for advertisers to get the best ROI on their media buy, and not just focusing on CPM.
Awesome.
So with that, yeah, thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to any questions anyone has.
You can either throw them in the chat, or Evan, you can bring anyone on stage that has a question. Got anything for us, Evan?
No, I think I don't see any questions in the chat, so I will go ahead and close this out. Thank you guys so much.
Hold on one second. You're doing a great job keeping the angular momentum on this, Evan. But we got a couple of minutes. Is there anything we can help with, Suzanne? What you got? Curious what your POV is on out of home. Awesome. So thank you so much for that question, Suzanne. Let me start with sort of our agency perspective, and then I know Trade Desk has a perspective here as well. We do buy digital out of home on behalf of our clients, and I think that there are a lot of great lift studies that show that if you buy out of home well, it can be a huge driver of direct response, and that's why it's such a fixture along our roads and in our cities. That said, it does require a multi-step conversion in a different way than a lot of device friendly experiences have. So I think depending on your brand and depending on what you're trying to accomplish, there can be really, really, really smart out of home applications, especially if you are a brick and mortar and you have a specific awareness objective in a specific area that you're trying to drive around. I think it gets much less compelling for clients that don't have a brick and mortar focus, just because there's so much more that you can do in video and in sort of richer media type formats, and in period moments when people are not in transitional liminal spaces. But yeah, I guess that would be our general POV. What you got, Gavin?
Yeah, I would say it definitely still has its place on the media plan, whether we're talking about standard traditional out of home or now digital out of home, where more measurement can be done on it. So we saw a couple of weeks ago, T-Mobile bought Vistar Media for $600 million, which is a digital out of home company. So I think they understand the value of attaching their own data assets to a solution like digital out of home, because there is a way to measure the effectiveness of that in an aggregate fashion. And that definitely has its place on a media plan. It's almost like a connected TV out of home. And so it's like a less targeted form of connected TV, I like to think of it as. And then just generally, like an anecdote of this is my 6-year-old is reading a book called Dog Man he picked up at the library at school. And I remember driving on the 101 freeway this morning here in Los Angeles, and I saw an out-of-home ad for Dog Man the movie coming to theaters January 31st. So now I'm going to take him to go see it. So that was effective at driving me to the movie theater as a little anecdote just this morning.
I dig it. Peter, how do you believe MMM will change within the next 5 to 10 years? Why don't you take this one first?
Sure. I mean, I think more signals going into MMM is going to be the biggest change. So historically, MMM has been a channel-based solution most predominantly, but now smaller advertisers are able to start running MMM at more granular signals, using other more aggregate MMMs as a proxy, as a baseline to understand the coefficient or the ROI of any given channel without having a ton of data historically to look at. So I think there's more real-time optimization opportunities with this signal over the next 5 or 10 years as we get more into big data and AI playing a role here. When historically MMM has been solely focused on data science teams manually building a model, I think there's going to be an opportunity for some of that to be scaled and automated while still having the data science rigor at the forefront. So I definitely see it becoming more big database and more scalable in terms of understanding more granularly the effectiveness of your media down to like an audience level, or as I mentioned earlier with connected television, looking at different dimensions within a single channel.
And I think the only addition to that would be that, we see it becoming more of a ongoing, recurrent program around MMM rather than sort of a one-off, build a model, learn from it, and then maybe revisit in 2 years or something like that. We think that a lot of the value comes from that tuning of the model based on an integrated approach with some of that incrementality testing in a much more ongoing basis. Kyle, do you see CDPs becoming a standard part of the measurement approach to try to net together customer journeys based on first-party data? You take that one, Gavin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see this with a lot of clients in our space. We're seeing this come up more and more now with brands that understand the value of their own first-party data. They have their own sales data. So we work with partners like Tealium, Adobe, Neustar, and others to understand the value of first-party data outside of a platform, so in a clean room environment. But definitely see CDPs becoming more and more prevalent over time. I think it's something that the industry is adopting more of, and we're at the tipping point of actually executing on strong use cases over that data. And I'm seeing that with a lot of my own clients, and leveraging these type of solutions is definitely one of the key questions that people are asking about. And then in terms of measuring impact, I see one-to-one measurement of if you ingest sales data into a CDP and then tying that conversion data to media exposures across your entire media mix, at least with partners like Trade Desk that allow you to send your own data to a CDP partner. We have that data asset called REDS, or raw event data stream, that our clients have access to that they can send to their CDP partners.
Thank you, Gavin. And then Darius, one more. This is going to be our last one. How do you position MMM as a benefit for companies more focused on omni-channel strategies? I think that it's perfect for those clients, especially. So it's the value of an M&M, the value of an MMM increases exponentially based on the number of channels that you're able to run it against, and that you're able to redeploy investment against. So it would not be a good solution for somebody that was spending 85% of their media budget in a single channel. It's just not going to give them what they want. But the more channels that are added to that mix, ultimately the more both the more signals that make the model more accurate, but ultimately the more levers to pull based on the findings from the MMM in terms of where you can redistribute that budget across channels to drive results. All right. Thank you so much, Gavin, for making the time. I said in our pre-call, sending a lot of positive energy to all of our friends in California with the ongoing fires out there. So sending positive energy your way. Thank you so much for making the time, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come and chat and watch us here today, audience. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Enjoy the conversation. Thanks everyone for joining.